Hello, Stitchers. Welcome to Stitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. I'm your host, Lisa Woolford. I'm a fourth-generation sewing enthusiast with more than 20 years of sewing experience. I am looking forward to today's conversation, so sit back, relax, and get ready to get your stitch together. Hey, friends. Hey, it's Lisa from Black Women Stitch and the Stitch Please podcast. Happy 2026. If no one has said it to you yet, I am excited and happy to be the first person to say it. If I'm the first podcast that you've listened to that has said happy 2026 to you, I am happy about that as well. For the last few years, I have been offering what I've called Sankofa episodes. This is a way to start the year by looking back. Sankofa is a principle. It is a word from the Akan people of Ghana in the Twi language. Sankofa is the understanding that it is not taboo to go back and retrieve what has been lost or forgotten. It helps us to understand that we can move forward while still turning our heads back to gather what we need. Sankofa is usually visually represented as intertwining hearts, or my favorite is a bird with its feet planted, body facing forward, head turned back, with an egg in its mouth. The picture illustrates that the bird has clearly forgotten the egg and it went back and got it. And that shows us that the retrieved egg is not an excess. It is necessary. It is what sustains life. And this is why it's okay to go back and get it. I'm doing this year in review to look back into 2025 and to think about the 4 categories that made up that year's highlights. They are community, knowledge, storytelling, and recognition. In 2025, I lived in Boston for 6 months as part of my sabbatical. This was a really wonderful and life-affirming and deeply meaningful time. I was a fellow at Wellesley College in the Humanities Center called the Susie Newhouse Humanities Center. It was a really wonderful time to really have a sabbatical, to step back and to concentrate on research, writing, thinking, and resting into some of the really wonderful possibilities of what it means to create Black Women Stitch and what it means to study and to create an archive of Black women's creativity and to celebrate that. Part of that allowed me to do some wonderful things at Wellesley College, including interviewing Portia Olayiwola, who was the former poet laureate of Boston. So I interviewed her at Wellesley. That was fantastic. N.K. Jemisin came through for a video interview. That was amazing. Janelle Monáe was also there. It was a fantastic fellowship year. And so in 2025, I spent 6 months in Boston, and I wanted to be involved not just at Wellesley College, but also in the city of Boston with folks who are Black creatives, with quilters, with audio folks. And so I'm happy to say that I was also able to do that. I had a wonderful conversation about Black Women Stitch with Dr. Kim Parker at Just Bookish, which is a fantastic bookstore operated by Olayiwola as well as her partner. And it is in Dorchester, and it was a wonderful, amazing space. And it was a great conversation. Similarly, I got to know 2 of the founding members of Sisters of the Cloth, a New England-based African-American quilt guild. And it was such a good time. I got to go to one of the quilt shows that they had done. They had a great demo where they had set up at a library and were doing like a quilt talk. I also got a chance to visit with the Codman Square Library Quilters. And this is a group of older folks. These were some folks who had lived in Boston from 60, 70, 80 years. They had been living in Boston. And one of the women, she talked about working for the phone company and how they had something called Mother's Hours. This was a time when mothers could work while their kids were at school. I also got to have some really meaningful conversations with Boston area craft businesses. There was a meetup organized by Abby Glassberg talking about, just dealing with what was happening in the craft industry as Joann Fabrics closed, as it looked like the pattern companies were also in a crisis. This really was something that was deeply concerning for independent craft businesses. And so we were able to have a great conversation about what they were doing and how they were pivoting. And the Craft Industry Alliance hosted that. And I also got a chance to meet and have lunch with Jenny from Cashmerette, who also lives in that area. And so that was kind of fun. We had actually a really great lunch at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, which is the museum right next to where I went to college, y'all. I went to college in Boston. And when I tell you, Boston, Massachusetts was utterly wasted on me as an 18 to 22-year-old, I did not visit one museum in 4 years. I am certain of it. Like, truly, what did I do with my 4 years? No idea. But I was not going to museums, and I apparently was not, as I did this time, visiting every single Boston Public Library. They have a passport, and you can collect stamps. Now, Boston has the very first public library with branches, and they have 26 branches. And I visited all 26. I think it was 25. I ended up getting a stamp because one was closed. But I got a full passport. So that was so exciting. And that takes us to the next thing that I have been very much grateful for 2025. Hey friends, hey, it's Lisa from Black Women Stitch and the Stitch Please podcast. And do you want to stay in the loop with everything Black Women Stitch? Sure you do. So our weekly newsletter is where it's at. You'll get podcast updates, community news, behind the scenes peeks, and ways to support the work we're doing. Whether you're a longtime listener or just getting to know us, this is the easiest way to stay connected. So click the link and sign up today. Promise we will not flood your inbox, just your creative spirit. Thanks so much. See you soon. The next powerful element of Sankofa that I want to kind of look back to when I think about what 2025 brought was knowledge. I feel like I learned a lot, and I felt like I was able to share that knowledge in meaningful ways with other people. And so last year, I was able to give a lecture at Wellesley College where I talked about sewing and history and lived practice and identity and liberation. And that was not only given at the college, which was a pretty well-attended event, it also was simulcast on Zoom, and I had such a really good turnout. So thank you so much if you were able to come to that. I'm grateful. And we do have the live recording of that available on the Black Women Stitch Patreon. In addition to giving that talk as knowledge, again, I visited the 25 branches of the Boston Public Library because I think libraries are amazing and the ones in Boston are fantastic. I also was able to do something that I had never done before, and that is to go to Africa. I went to South Africa, to Cape Town, to the University of the Western Cape for their winter school session. And this was part of a global humanities institute. And they have a Yatsiba lab there where they talk about freedom, liberation, meaning making. And I was able to talk about Black Women Stitch there. And in particular, the thing I was very excited to share was that the needle is older than the wheel. And one of the first needles to be discovered was discovered in South Africa in a cave in a place called Blonos. And it was a cave dig, and they discovered 60,000-year-old needles. And that means that the needle is older than the wheel. If we imagine what the wheel has brought to the world, and the needle is older than that, it gives us a chance to think about the needle as I see it as crucial to human-centered design. That you need something to build, to create garments for your body, to create shelter, to stitch animal hides together. It really is about covering and protecting the body and building up spaces around the body. And it's that the needle helps to do that. And I was just really excited to talk about that in South Africa, where one of the very first needles was discovered. And so it was really a wonderful opportunity. And so I felt really grateful and am still grateful and excited that I got a chance to go to Africa for the first time. And as I am recording this now, I am preparing to go to Ghana, which means I'll be going to Africa for a second time, kind of in a calendar year, leaving at the end of December and returning in early January. And so it seems as though this has been a wonderful time to travel and to have a strong and develop a strong knowledge base and to kind of share that in other places. I'm also really hoping that I'll get a chance to go back to Cape Town and hopefully to Ghana in 2026. So I've talked about how community and knowledge were really important times or elements for me for Black Women Stitch and the Stitch Please podcast in 2025. Now let me turn to talk about storytelling. There were two important elements of storytelling that happened in 2025 that were something I had wanted to do for a long time. The type of podcast that I currently do and what you're listening to is kind of called a chat show. I do interviews with people. I also do standalone episodes where, just like this one, where I'm talking about things that have happened, or I'm talking about a topic, or I'm educating I'm researching an issue, or I'm explaining how the history of the button, or what's your best sewing style, or how do you cut your notches. Stay tuned for that one. That's coming up soon. There's other kind of podcasts, as you might or might not know. One of the types of podcast is a narrative podcast. And these are podcasts that tell stories about history, about different experiences. A few examples that are quite wonderful: Black is America by Dominic Lawson. Wait for It by Ronald Young Jr. is a narrative podcast. There's also audio dramas like Harlem Queen. These are all examples of podcasts that are narrative-driven storytelling. Some of them require voice acting. So I just really admire that. So something I wanted to try in 2025 was a bit of narrative podcasting. I wanted to see if I could tell a story related to Black Women Stitch and not just explain something amazing about the history of the zipper, right? Which, of course, is fascinating. We love that. Who doesn't want to hear the history of the zipper? But 2025 gave the opportunity for me to pursue storytelling in a different way. And I did that in two ways. First, in February, I created an episode that was featured on Apple Podcasts about the idea of what it means to live into one's creativity. And I had been doing some research and came across this story from Maxine Craig's book, Ain't I a Beauty Queen? And in this book, this professor studies Black beauty queens from the 1900s, like maybe 1905, all the way up until the late 1990s, and thinks about how Black women and beauty standards have kind of operated against one another, having Black beauty competitions, integrating Black beauty contestants into white ones. It's a really wonderful book. But I came across Evelyn Sanders' story in her work, in Maxine Craig's book. The story of Evelyn is so compelling because Evelyn Sanders was a dark-skinned Black girl who wanted to participate in a beauty contest that was all Black, called Miss Fine Brown Frame. Now, Miss Fine Brown Frame was a song. It was very, very popular. And it was so popular that the band leader decided to have a beauty contest. And he had them all around the country. And what he really wanted to do was to have Miss Fine Brown Frame be an alternative, a Black alternative to Miss America. It didn't last that long, though the Miss Fine Brown Frame lasted quite a bit of time. I ended up finding some fine brown frames in the mid 1950s, and Evelyn Saunders was participating in the early 1940s. So it lasted for a while. But Evelyn Saunders' claim to fame is that she is the first Black woman to appear in Ebony magazine in a bikini. And this is a BFD because bikinis were not readily available. But I want you to go back and listen to that episode. I think it's called Miss Fine Brown Frame, and it's a wonderful episode, I think. And there's some really great sound editing in there, and it's kind of immersive storytelling. So I was really happy to have pulled that off. I was quite nervous about it, but I was grateful that I was able to do that. So check out that episode from 2025 on Miss Fine Brown Frame. And the artwork is really beautiful. So do check it out and learn why it's such a big deal that Evelyn Sanders got on that stage and strutted her stuff for that audience in a way they had never seen before. Similarly, toward the end of the year, I did an audio flux. Audio flux is a 3-minute audio storytelling competition. They send out a pitch, and this year's topic was creative. The 2025 topic was creative tension. And they were working with Lorna Brown Hamilton, who is a knitter based in the UK, who is a wonderful advocate, artist, leader, community organizer, just a wonderful, she's been called the Banksy of knitting. And she has this thing that she does called tension birds. And this is when you make a tension square. She then stitches the tension square and shapes it like a bird. And this, she gives these to people. And she created tension birds as part of the prizes so that the winners of the audio flux circuit would get a tension bird. So between the possibility of getting a tension bird and being able to tell the story of Black Women Stitch, the origin story, I decided to create a narrative audio piece called Very Fine People. I submitted the piece. I worked with and had great encouragement from Ronald Young Jr., who helped with story. A.D. Carson did mixing, mastering, and editing. Dominic Lawson from Black is America helped with voice coaching. And DJ Crate Digger was essential as a sound designer for someone who he took the sound of the sewing machine that I gave him. And so Crate Digger did a fantastic job with that piece of audio and just made it sound so much better. So I submitted it, and I'm so happy to say that we were selected as one of the 4 winners. And the only U.S. winner among 72 entries from 16 different countries. And they voted on these at a festival in England. And I'm just so grateful that the Very Fine People piece was selected. So I talked about storytelling, community, and knowledge. And I'm going to close with recognition. I've just been so grateful to be in creative community with so many wonderful people and institutions. For the first time in 2025, I participated in H&H Americas. I was a judge for the Golden Scissors competition, which is a major industry award, and was very grateful to be included in that process and to look at so many folks who make the craft industry what it is. And so that was a real honor to be a judge for that. And then to also attend H&H Americas and to have such a good experience that Black Women Stitch will be back at H&H Americas in Chicago. Well, actually, I think it's in Rosemont, which is near the airport, near the O'Hare Airport in Chicago. And we'll be back teaching as well as doing on-the-ground interviews and stuff like that. So check us out and stay tuned for more information. Another gratitude that I want to acknowledge, another recognition, was being nominated by the Podcasting Academy for an Ambie for the best indie podcast. The nomination is such an honor. The Podcasting Academy is a venerable organization, and we were able to win Best DIY Podcast a few years ago. So to go from a DIY category to an indie category and to get an indie podcast nomination is a big deal, and I am so grateful. And speaking of gratitude, toward the end of 2025, for the very first time, the Black Podcasting Awards had an in-person ceremony. It was part of Afros and Audios. And I'm happy to say that the Stitch Please podcast won 3 Black Podcasting Awards. That was Best Longtime Podcast, Best Black Girl Magic Podcast, and Best Arts Podcast. And that brings our total to 7 Black Podcasting Awards. Very, very grateful and just so excited to see what next year holds. To close out today, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Stitch Please podcast. Thank you for supporting Black Women Stitch. Thank you for being on our Patreon and in our socials. Thank you for liking our posts and reposting them and sharing them. And thank you for all the goodwill that you bring to the podcast and to the platform. We are immensely grateful. Looking back at 2025 reminds me that the past is not behind us, it is beside us. The lessons, the people, the moments of care and courage are still active if we're willing to retrieve them. Sankofa does not ask us to stop moving forward. It asks us to move forward with what matters. And I just want to add, and I think this was something that I continually reminded myself of, that 2025 was a difficult year for many. 300,000 Black women fired. The Department of Education dismantled and just decimated. Joanne Fabrics closing 500 stores. The pattern companies in crisis. There's been a lot of upheaval for sure. I think what's important to remember, and what this episode, looking back, reminds me of, is that good things are possible. Good things are possible. And I think I would argue good things are necessary, that good things are possible and even necessary in difficult times. And just like the Sankofa bird went back and got the egg that it had forgotten or dropped or whatever, the first retrieval is really important. And sometimes that first retrieval is internal. As you think about 2026 and stepping forward into a new year, what do you want to look back at the past and bring with you? What one thing might be really necessary to kind of keep you going and helping you to move forward? For me personally, I'm going to say saying yes to myself first is a priority. And by saying yes to myself first, I'm not saying, oh, yes, I can have this or whatever. I'm saying, yes, I have permission to dream. Yes, I have permission to go beyond that which is expected. Just because I don't see it doesn't mean it's not true. And so I think for those who are creating and dreaming and planning and want so much, it is still possible. So that's what I would invite us to consider and to keep in mind as we move forward into 2026. Have a happy, great new year. And thank you for being with us today. And we will see you next time on the Stitch Please podcast.
You've been listening to Stitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. We appreciate you joining us this week and every week for stories that center Black women, girls, and femmes in sewing. We invite you to join the Black Women Stitch Patreon community with giving levels beginning at $5 a month. Your contributions help us bring the Stitch Please podcast to you every week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. And come back next week and we'll help you get your stitch together.